Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumbray here again. Last day of Cinemacon, just out of the Paramount Pictures panel, and of course, it was all about Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. So last year we saw Top Gun: Maverick, and it was amazing. They didn't actually show us the whole movie, of course. They showed us the new trailer, but we did see a 20-minute extended scene, which is not the beginning of the movie. It's from like midway through the film, and it kind of sets up Haley Atwell's character, who seems to be almost a co-lead with Cruise in this one. So she's kind of this sexy con woman who ends up in possession of a drive that the bad guy, played by Issei Morales, wants. And the whole sequence that we see is basically she's arrested by police in Rome, and it ends up being a massive car chase where they're being chased by Pom Clementieff's character, who's the henchwoman in a giant police Humvee, whereas Cruise and Haley Atwell are in this kind of broken down Fiat. And it's kind of funny because Cruise clearly his character anyway has no idea how to deal with like a Fiat when he's used to these super high performance vehicles. There's also a great scene where Haley Atwell ends up driving. At one point she gets stuck in a roundabout in Rome. Rome's roundabouts are known to be kind of infamously hard to navigate, and they just keep going around and around, and it's kind of a funny moment. The movie looks outstanding. I mean, I really think they're probably working on one of the best action flicks ever, between the two films, Dead Reckoning and Dead Reckoning Part 2. We did see the new trailer, which sets up Issei Morales' character a little bit. He seems to be a former compatriot of Cruise's, because they're about the same age. I think he's like the evil Ethan Hunt. I mean, this movie, though, is not going to necessarily be plot heavy. I think it's really the different kind of set pieces that they've organized, with like stuff in the desert, that insane cliff jump that we've seen teased, that I think happens in Iceland. I mean, this is going to be an epic film, and apparently about 3 hours long, but I think it's going to be great. Otherwise, there were a couple other really cool surprises. So Martin Scorsese came out and finally introduced the trailer for Killers of the Flower Moon. Not sure when people are going to see it. Probably around the time it makes its Cannes premiere. So yeah, it sets up the Osage Nation. They're on oil-rich land, and Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro's characters basically are trying to get their money. DiCaprio ends up marrying Lily Gladstone's character, who's kind of a tribal princess, and they end up committing tons of murders. It's based on Killers of the Flower Moon, of course, in the book by David Gran, which is a true story. You see a little bit of Jesse Plemons' character. He's the FBI investigator, and he's wearing like this 10-gallon cowboy hat and affects this kind of like cowboyish drawl. But I think he's trying to disarm DiCaprio's character, who's presented as kind of a dunce a little bit, which is interesting for DiCaprio, but also a little bit conscience-stricken. So I think he's somewhat sympathetic. De Niro seems to be the big bad guy in this film. What's interesting, though, is that there have been a lot of rumors that De Niro was being de-aged for the film with CGI, because the character that he's playing was really only in his 40s. It doesn't look like they actually bothered with that. They might have de-aged him a little bit, but he looks like Robert De Niro, and he looks like an older Robert De Niro, and it suits the character perfectly from what I can tell. I mean, De Niro is a very well-preserved guy. He looks like he's in pretty good shape. He moves well. So I think they probably did away with the de-aging, and I think that's probably a good thing, because as much as I love The Irishman, it was kind of distracting. Anyway, Killers of the Flower Moon looks amazing. We also saw the first trailer for A Quiet Place Day 1. Didn't give a ton away because apparently it just finished shooting, but it centers around Lupita Nyong'o, who's in New York at the time the invasion happens. And New York, of course, is the loudest city in the world. You get tiny glimpses at how the aliens just laid waste to the city and how the apocalypse actually happened. It looks to be done on a kind of a bigger scale than the last few Quiet Place movies. John Krasinski was there, of course, and he presented a bit of footage from the movie that he's directing called If, which stands for Imaginary Friends. And it's about a little girl who can see imaginary friends, and they're voiced by big stars like, Steve Carell, Matt Damon, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Awkwafina. It looks like they're CGI type Pixar characters interacting with live action. Ryan Reynolds plays the male lead in the film. They're kind of going, I think, for a Who Framed Roger Rabbit vibe. Krasinski said it's very much in the mold of like E.T. or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and actually Reynolds described it in the behind-the-scenes footage that we saw as a live-action Pixar film. It looks like that's what they're going for. I wasn't 100% sold on the trailer, but maybe it'll work better as a film than from what I saw. But I don't know, it just seems it seems like something that we've seen kind of done before. It looks a little bit too much like Detective Pikachu for my taste, but anyway, we'll see. I could be totally wrong. It could end up being a masterpiece. Who knows? We also saw some footage from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. That was one they were promoting really hard with some pretty stunning animation, actually, that reminded me a lot of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen wrote it. They're both huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fans, and this is definitely a lot more like the cartoon series or the original Ninja Turtles movies than the comics, and definitely not at all like the Michael Bay movies that we saw a couple of years ago. It's not dark. It's got real teenagers voicing the Ninja Turtles and a lot more comedy. Ice Cube is in there, tons of voices. It looks like a lot of fun, and it could theoretically, I think, launch a big franchise. And I think that Paramount really wants to get in on the animated space, not just stuff for kids. Like they promoted Paw Patrol, of course, which has Kim Kardashian now, and there's a new Smurf movie with Smurfette voiced by Rihanna, who actually came out on stage and like worked the audience really well and was super into it, and everybody just went mental when they saw Rihanna. I mean, you could like tell like the star quality of her just kind of is infectious. But for an older audience, they talked about Transformers 1, which is this animated film where Chris Hemsworth voices a young Optimus Prime and Brian Tyree Henry voices Megatron, which is cool. Scarlett Johansson, John Hamm are both in it as voices. Keegan-Michael Key is voicing Bumblebee. It looks like they have pretty high hopes for that, but we didn't see any footage from it whatsoever. It makes sense to me that you would make an animated Transformers movie, though. It just seems like it would go well. Also, Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original series creators are coming back to do a big theatrical film. It's like their apology movie for the M. Night Shyamalan movie that I bet everybody hopes they can forget. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it was a great presentation. Seeing Scorsese was a thrill. I'm actually off to a lunch thing that he's doing, so hopefully I'll have some more Scorsese scoop coming up. But another great panel at Cinemacon.